Right. Hello, my name is Katia Mori, and here's my signature experience project for the semester. All right, my project. What did I plan on doing? So my original plan was to turn a laptop into a tablet. Here was the reference I was going to use. Oh, that was using it for the exception. I think there is a stylus here, right here. I wasn't going to use a stylus because my computer did come with a touchscreen, so I didn't plan on using stylus. And here's like kind of a diagram of something similar that I was going to do, but I did use inspiration from this and kind of made it my own. So why? So I mainly, if you remember from my research project, I did mine over green computing. So that's environmental impacts from technology. And ever since then, I've been so influenced from it, and I wanted to try because it was something I really wanted to do professionally. So I wanted to think, what is some way in college I can get into it? What are some ways I can experiment with green computing? Since I am in college, I'm a college student, I don't have that many resources right now. I thought this was the perfect way to kind of test the waters and see if I really enjoy doing it. So, first off, what are they? What's carbon footprint? So, carbon footprint is pretty much how much carbon emissions you produce as a person. So, that's going to be how much gasoline you use and how much electricity you use. So, from those, you release a bunch of emissions, and that's kind of what influences the climate change because those carbon dioxide goes up into our atmosphere and gets trapped there for several hundreds of years. And when it's trapped, um, air kind of reflects, like heat reflexes off and it hits our surface. So it causes the earth to heat up a little bit more, which is why we experience more longer summers, less cold winters, stuff like that. And it kind of arises the controversy of like, what can we do to reduce climate change? What can I do? That's kind of what influenced me. I'm like, what can I do as a person to do this? To reduce my carbon footprint. And so e-waste is pretty much electronic waste, kind of similar to email. I thought that was very cute. So e-waste. So when people have old laptops, most of them like to throw them away as you do trash. That is very environmentally damaging, and it's probably one of the most arising environmental problems right now. So what happens when you throw away a laptop? You're throwing away lithium, you're throwing away plasma, you're like a bunch of harmful chemicals it took to make it. You're putting in the landfill, you're destroying it, which releases toxins that goes into our atmosphere. Then when it's getting buried, those get released into the soil, which kind of affect the ecosystems, local ecosystems, and that kind of in turn just really hurts our environment. So that's why I kind of wanted to explore e-waste more because it's something that's not really talked about right now, and it's a huge problem, especially in third world countries. It increases air pollution, and it's starting to get up there, and it also influences climate change as well. So and I wanted to prove on hardware skills. So going into computer engineering, I have done mostly software. I've written games and code, and I haven't really done hardware before. So I thought, why not? This is the perfect time for me right now to explore hardware and see if I enjoy it and see if I really want to explore more hardware or software. And that's the main reasoning. My resources. So my laptop. So it was not free. I did pay for it when I bought it the first time. But for this project solely, my laptop was free since I didn't have to pay for it again. I did have to buy a new battery, which will be in a power jack, which I'll go into detail later about why I did that. So that was $45.62, and that power jack was $6.15. So the total I spent for this project alone was $51.35. Old versus new. So my goal is to highlight the possibilities of sustainability to reduce waste. And so that's taking a broken laptop and recycling it, making it new again. So I wanted to show how much I can save in comparison, not only economically, but environmentally as well. So as previously discussed, I spent $51.35 rebuilding it. And this new data comes from a new laptop of the same model. So the model I have right now is the Dell Inspiron 13 7000. So for that laptop right now, it sells for $500. The construction of the whole laptop is 190 million liters of water, which includes the motherboard, the battery, the plasma, and the screen. All of that is just 190 million for one laptop, which is crazy. So for the old one, I did have to purchase a new battery. And for lithium mining does require a lot of water. So I did calculate how much lithium was in the battery and per how much water it took to mine lithium. So using a little bit of basic math, I came up with 24 million liters of water. And since I didn't manufacture the old laptop, I didn't release any carbon emissions. So that's 0 kilograms. But for that new laptop, it released 350 kilograms of carbon emissions for that one laptop, which is crazy to think about how this 13-inch little screen can do so much impact on the environment. So the total, I saved $448.64 from rebuilding, 166 million liters of water, and 350 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Anatomy 101. So a laptop is kind of like a body. It's like a human. It's made up of so many components, and if one of them breaks, it's detrimental to the whole system. So for this project, I had to focus on 4 main parts. So that was going to be the CPU. So that's going to be the heart. That's going to be, it's kind of the interpreter. So when you input something, it goes through the CPU. And then that CPU translates it into binary. And that's kind of the hard interprets the input into information the hardware can understand. And the hardware comes up with that output that you're requesting. So the mind is the motherboard. So that motherboard would be that green. Let's see if I can kind of go down here. It's going to be this green right here. So that's going to be more of like the brain of the computer. And from that brain, you can see a bunch of wires and lights and little buttons. Those are going to be more of the neurons, and they all have their own specific role. That mind just kind of connects all of them together and kind of wraps it up in one big bow. Lungs are the battery. So like a human, we take in oxygen and we release it. That's kind of the battery. It takes in electricity and it releases it into the system to power it up. And the body is the case. So that skin is going to be that keyboard, the monitor, and you can do you can watch through the monitor, you can type through the keyboard, you can click with the mouse, just like the body, we just move our hands, we see with our eyes. So they're both very similar. Design. So this was the original design I used to make my tablet, to attempt to make my tablet. So over here, we have what it would look like. So we have the monitor. So it's going to be that first rectangle. Here, the little apps. We have our charging port right here. In that back of the laptop where we have the on and sound. So my plan was to remove that keyboard from the internal computer. And I was kind of displaying that with the desk and how I was going to face it with the monitor. And so then over here, here's the monitor and here's that internal computer. I wanted to combine those, solder those wires from the hinges from that main computer and directly into the monitor rather than using the hinges, and just kind of solder those wires together. And over here is also removing that monitor from the back of the computer. So that's where going to be where all the stickers were. It's removing that. And then I was going to solder these two parts together to make them stick, to make it one body. The journey. So first, the first and longest thing I had to do was find the problem. A dead laptop isn't going to make a working tablet. I had to figure out why it died in the first place. So I thought it was just going to be one simple problem, but it turned into 3. The first problem was the battery was dead. When I turned on the computer, it didn't even register that the battery was there in the first place. The second problem, the power jack broke. When I did put in the battery, I noticed that it wasn't charging. And so I looked closer and I realized that if you can see over here, there was just a bunch of dust and cracks and dents over here in the shell, and that really affected the wires from that power jack. So I did have to buy a new one. The third problem, which was the most surprising problem was the software wasn't registering the charger. So that's going to be the screen right here. So what happened was it was just so used to that charger not working that it didn't have the software to recognize that it was fixed. So I did have to do a software update with certain systems, which will be into detail with this one. So fixing the laptop. The first problem, I had to buy a battery, which was simple, probably the easiest thing I had to do. Um, and that second problem, buying a new power jack. So I do have older laptops that I did want to replace the parts with, so I didn't have to buy as much money and use, buy a new battery because that's kind of not the goal I wanted to do. But I did realize that my older batteries just had less. Oh, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. For example, the battery was like a 16 pin right here, and my older batteries is like 4 pins. It just none of the parts were gonna fit. So I did have to buy new parts for this newer edition of a computer for both of those problems. And the third problem, I had to install a new BIOS system. So I did have to go to Dell support and just buy that new update and disable the warning so that the computer doesn't so the computer can learn to do more research besides just assuming it doesn't work because the warning is there, because it automatically puts that warning on there. So I did have to disable that. And I also had to wiggle the charger until it fit. So what happened was that AC adapter, if we can see here, the center wasn't connecting to the AC adapter. So I just had to wiggle it to a point where they did touch and it did charge. So I did mark that with masking tape to help me identify where that sweet spot is. Changing plans. I didn't expect to change plans, to be honest. But the reason why I did was because of potential. By the time I fixed the computer, I realized that it was a newer edition and it did interpret a lot of things we use today in comparison to my older editions. So I didn't want to waste the potential it now had and just completely demolishing it to make a tablet out of it. I just thought it had more potential as a computer or a laptop rather than a tablet. My alternatives. So I think my main alternative was to keep it how it is and perfect what I already have. And so what's next? What did I decide to do? So my new plan was to donate the laptop. With COVID cases arising and with this whole year together, school has been online. And it's, last year you don't think about it, but last year you could do school without a laptop. You write homework, go to lectures. Now you need a laptop to go to school. Like that is a necessity. And people right now people are losing jobs and they can't afford technology. Like they don't have the opportunity right now to buy it. So I wanted to maximize this laptop's potential by giving it to a student who really needs it for school. My plan was to wipe the hard drive. In order to donate it, all my personal data was going to be erased completely so that person can make it their own. I also plan on removing the stickers as well. I've also been contacting schools. So I have a family friend who works with low income communities, and I'm currently going back and forth, and we're trying to find a match with someone who has a technology based need. And I was told this process is going to take a couple weeks, which is why I don't have the final donation slide ready, because it just with rising cases in December, it just didn't work out. Conclusion. So I learned academically how much resources go into a laptop. I didn't realize how much water went into it and how many steps it took to, because you don't think about water, but you don't think how much natural resources go into this just because technology is on the complete other side of the spectrum from the environment. And so you don't think about how much actually goes into it until you do the research. And there's actually not a lot of resources. I definitely had to dig. So that was I also had to, pick and choose my resources because they were just so limited. I also learned to have a better understanding of laptop components. So I did have to understand, fixing one thing isn't going to fix the other. So I had to learn what each part did and how that influenced another. So that was also very interesting for me to learn. I did reach one of my goals and I did improve on my hardware skills. So I did learn, connecting that power jack, cleaning the wires, making sure they all fit. I learned how to do that with this project, which is really helpful, and I think is a really good skill that I will be using later on in future projects. So, what did I learn on a moral aspect? So, I learned how to think logically, and I had to think about kind of like one of our ethics thing. Did you want to wreck a tablet and make something new, or did you want to perfect something you've already have? And so, I also had to think with fixing the computer, this doesn't work. So what are things I can do to fix it? And just trying. It's just a bunch of trial and error, especially with this project. It was just a bunch of like, what's going to work, what's not going to work. It's also okay to fail. I have failed so many times trying to fix this computer and I've gotten very frustrated, but it only led me closer to fixing it. So I'm very grateful for the mistakes I made. So I also learned that doing more work isn't necessarily helpful. I realize now that, taking apart that tablet and just having like just a really chunky tablet and doing that all of that work wasn't going to be as good as just, making this computer perfect for someone who really needs it. And things don't turn out the way you expect. I'm someone who kind of likes to start things and finish it with a plan. So for things to just completely go the other direction was really interesting for me. And I really learned a lot of like quickly adapting, like looking at a problem and like quickly thinking of a solution and how to execute it. So what's the future looking like? So I'd love to do more hands-on projects like this in the future. I would definitely actually really enjoy hardware. Do I say more than software? Maybe. I like them both now. So I'd definitely love to do more like Arduino, more hardware to software work. I've also would like to try building a tablet again, but this time on a computer with less potential than the Dell. I do have a old Toshiba that's like 10 years old that I think I might try on just because I would be less risk. And I would love to donate more computers to students. I loved talking to schools and seeing what was in demand and just kind of researching how many people actually needed it. So I would really love to fix more computers and donate it to people who absolutely need it. And I think that's just for me, it just made me feel so good and I loved it. And yeah, that's the end of my project. So let me stop sharing. I also did want to show off really quick. Here's the laptop. It's all fixed. I also have the battery percentage and everything works. I just need to wipe the hard drive, which I did plan on doing, but I wanted to make sure the computer worked first because I didn't want to donate it and wipe everything and for it not to work. So I was going to do more experiments on it this week before I completely wiped it and make sure it worked with my data. And yeah, that's just the end of my project. Thank you so much for listening.